Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I rise to make a few remarks in relation to the budget and really to reflect on what this budget can tell us about this government and this state, because we all know that budgets are about choices, and the choices made in this budget are very illustrative. And I'm mindful of the comments made by Dr Con earlier, where she was talking about the choices that parents make in respect of their children, because state budgets are about choices, family budgets are about choices, and from the choices that are made, from the priorities that are determined, we learn a lot. I've already addressed my disappointment at the lack of support in this budget for the anti-slavery hotline, a choice which very much reflects the values of this government. I received correspondence from the New South Wales Anti-Slavery Commissioner because in my remarks yesterday I underestimated the demand that the hotline receives. And in fact, he reports that from Q1 to Q2 of 2026, there is a 56% increase in inquiries to that anti-slavery hotline, which underlines the need. And he said that, of course, places further strain on our tiny team of less than 2 FTE, including myself managing this caseload. And that level of engagement, he notes, and support to victim survivors is what is possible within the hotline operating from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And he continues that for around 2 years, we ran the hotline 24/7. And a large fraction of our calls from victims were received outside working hours. I took most of these calls outside working hours personally. There were many nights I spent working with victims to find accommodation, police support, health care, or simply prevent suicide. I have spent a lot of time, the Anti-Slavery Commissioner writes, in police and hospital waiting rooms. And I note that the Treasurer has walked into the chamber, and I know that the Treasurer too has a copy of this letter from the Anti-Slavery Commissioner, where he continues that after evaluating the fiscal burden and psychosocial risk to me and my team from operating this way, we took the very difficult decision in late 2024 to move the hotline to a working hours only model, despite knowing that this would mean many of the most vulnerable workers could not contact us during those hours. This difficult managerial decision was a direct consequence of resourcing limitations for my office under the current funding arrangements. Resourcing limitations which this budget, this government, had the ability to address, but has not. Resourcing limitations which this House, supported by this government, called on the Treasurer and this government to address in the budget. But budgets are about choices, and choices reflect values. Apparently this budget reflects Labor values. I feel that the light on the hill has been extinguished by some of the choices that have been made in this budget. I'm pleased to see the increase in funding for the Mental Health Commission, charged as they are with the very important work of supporting the suicide prevention councils. But that, sadly, is where the good news ends in the area of mental health. It is entirely appropriate that government continues to fund good programs in this area. But this funding is not new funding. And frankly, it represents baseline funding when we are seeing growing demand. And the funding in this budget is continuation funding, and very little of it is preventative funding. Surely what we want is to work towards people being mentally well as much as possible, rather than always focusing on patching them up afterwards. But we don't see any of that in this budget. Government is about choices. And in mental health, the choice has been steady as she goes, keep rolling on the programs. And I commend the people working in those programs. I commend the good work that is being done. But everybody in this sector is crying out and saying, We need more, we need new, we need prevention, and that is not in this budget. And that is a choice that was made. If we look in the area of people facing the courts, the choice made was to cut the funding to legal aid, to cut the funding available to support people facing the courts who are generally not in a position to be able to adequately fund the defence themselves. At the same time, the choice was made to increase the funding for prosecution. So legal aid down, prosecution up. That is a choice made in this budget. And then we come to reflect on the spending for some of our key arts institutions, really important cultural institutions that have been a gift to the people of New South Wales for decades, and in the case of the State Library, for 2 centuries, celebrating as they are their 200th anniversary this year. Funding's been cut to the art gallery. But interestingly, the expectation set for the revenue that will be achieved from the sale of goods and services has been increased. The library has met the same fate. Look, frankly, when it comes to these key cultural institutions, this is starting to look like privatisation by stealth. Give them less than they spent last year, but make sure you expect them to raise more money themselves, sell more tea towels, or make sure that when you're thinking about the sort of exhibitions you want to bring, you bring really safe, blockbuster exhibitions. And then in a cost of living crisis, you make sure that the fees that have to be charged so that families can take their children to see what is part of the cultural heritage of all of us are higher than they have ever been. Government is about choices, budgets are about choices, and we learn a lot about a government from the choices that they make. And I, for one, do not like a lot of the choices that I see in this budget.